إلى جانب حالة مدافعين آخرين تجريما للعمل المشروع في مجال حقوق الإنسان. على الرغم من آراء الفريق العامل المعني بالاحتجاز التعسفي، لم يضمن المغرب حتى الآن سبل الانتصاف الفعالة والمساءلة، ويزيد غياب المراقبة المستقلة بالإقليم المحتل من تفاقم هذه الانتهاكات. السيد نائب الرئيس، على ضوء هذه المخاوف المستمرة نحث المجلس إلى الدعوة للإفراج الفوري عن المعتقلين السياسيين لممارسة حرياتهم الأساسية وتجديد النظر في إنشاء آلية مستقلة ودائمة لرصد خروقات حقوق الإنسان بالصحراء الغربية. وشكرا.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a Foro Mediterráneo para la promoción de los derechos del ciudadano a través de video.
يسعدنا في المنتدى المتوسط للرقي بحقوق المواطن أن نسلط الضوء على التقدم الذي أحرزته المملكة المغربية في تعزيز حقوق المرأة، انسجاما مع التزاماتها بموجب اتفاقية القضاء على جميع أشكال التمييز ضد المرأة. ولقد شكل دستور 2011 والإصلاحات القانونية والسياساتية المصاحبة خطوة نوعية نحو المساواة والعدالة، مع توفير إطار قانوني متين لحماية حقوق المرأة على كافة الأصعدة. كما شهدنا نتائج مشجعة في مكافحة العنف القائم على النوع الاجتماعي من خلال سياسات داعمة وآليات فعالة لحماية الضحايا، إلى جانب برامج تنموية موجهة للنساء القرويات ساهمت في تحسين الوصول إلى الخدمات الأساسية والفرص الاقتصادية والاجتماعية. وفي مجال المشاركة السياسية والحياة العامة تحققت خطوات إيجابية نحو تمثيل أكبر للمرأة، مع تشجيع إشراك المجتمع المدني النسائي في إعداد السياسات وتنفيذها وتقييمها. إن هذه الإنجازات تعكس التزام المغرب الثابت بالتمكين الفعال للمرأة، وهي دعوة للاستمرار في تطوير سياسات شاملة ومؤسسية تضمن مشاركة النساء من جميع الفئات، بما في ذلك الأقليات والنساء في أوضاع الهشاشة، لضمان تطبيق كامل وفعال لاتفاقية سيطاو. ونحن واثقون بأن هذا المسار الإيجابي سيستمر ليحقق المساواة والعدالة لكل النساء ويعزز التنمية المستدامة والمجتمع المتماسك في المغرب.
Gracias. Cedo la palabra a Eliska Relief Foundation.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La Fondation Eliska Relief souhaite attirer l'attention des membres du Conseil et des États observateurs sur la situation alarmante au regard des guerres que les États-Unis et Israël continuent d'alimenter au Moyen-Orient. Monsieur le Président, de nouvelles guerres ne feront qu'aggraver le chaos dans une région déjà instable, avec des conséquences qui pourraient durer des décennies pour les civils et risquent de porter gravement atteinte aux droits humains et au droit international. Monsieur le Président, tous ces développements surviennent à un moment où la dépendance militaire à l'égard de l'intelligence artificielle s'accélère. En février 2026, OpenAI a signé un accord avec le département de la Défense des États-Unis afin de déployer ces modèles d'intelligence artificielle au sein des réseaux militaires américains classifiés. Cette évolution soulève de sérieuses préoccupations quant à l'utilisation de ces technologies pour la surveillance de masse ou dans des systèmes d'armes autonomes échappant à un contrôle humain effectif. Par conséquent, la Fondation Eliska appelle tous les États à condamner ces pratiques et à agir afin de prévenir des conséquences incalculables et potentiellement catastrophiques. Nous recommandons également que les États membres du Conseil adoptent un projet de résolution visant à traiter les risques liés à l'utilisation militaire des technologies d'intelligence artificielle. Je vous remercie.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a Shanxi Patriotic Volunteer Association.
主席，各位代表，我是国际爱国公约组织代表，倡导爱国不能损害他国利益。今年，联合国成立80周年，人权理事会成立20周年，北京是国际社会携手迈向繁荣的关键节点。然而，一些霸权国家公然背离国际规则，秉持我不需要国际法的强盗逻辑，将原本有序的国际社会重新拖入丛林法则的强盗世界。他们肆意绑架主权国家总统，谋杀主权国家领导人，疯狂掠夺他国资源与土地，让世界深陷单边主义、保护主义、霸权主义的泥潭，多边主义遭受重创，国际人权事业也波折不断，世界正面临前所未有的严峻挑战。在我们看来，国际社会乱象丛生，其根本原因在于缺乏全球共同认可的爱国观。 这使得部分国家的政治精英们在制定国家发展政策时只图自身国家利益，全然不顾他国权益。为此，我们联合66个国家的近300家非政府组织，共同起草国际爱国公约，设计国家发展权审议机制。我们期望通过践行国际爱国公约，开展国家发展权审议，确保各国在追求国家发展时制定不损害他国合法权益的政策，推动国家间和平持续发展，为国际社会的和谐稳定筑牢坚实保障。谢谢大家。
Gracias. Cedo la palabra a Asociazione Comunità Papa Giovanni XXIII.
Mr. Vice President, APG23 welcomes the Secretary General's report on the human rights of migrants. We want to bring the voices of people on the move we meet in our facilities and through the different activities we carry out to support them. Their stories show how migrants continue to experience human rights violations and are ever more criminalized and stigmatized, victims of widespread dehumanizing narratives and repressive measures. Border control is too often undertaken in the absolute violation of human rights, through indiscriminate use of violence, pushbacks, and arbitrary detention. Several national migration policies result in militarizing or externalizing border control and limiting access to international protection to asylum seekers. We strongly urge member states to adopt a migration governance framework that prioritizes justice, accountability, protection of human life, and access to rights and services. We advocate for safe, accessible, independent and effective monitoring systems and complaint mechanisms, also by involving civil society, national human rights institutions and migrant-led organizations. Too often, vulnerability is treated as a crime rather than a condition requiring protection. All migrants, regardless of their status, are human rights holders. Protecting their lives, integrity, safety and dignity is not a political option, but is a legal and ethical obligation. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a Matt for Peace, Development and Human Rights Association.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. During the high-level segment, most statements highlighted the serious threats facing human rights and the effectiveness and efficiency of this Council after 20 years since its establishment. However, will we continue to diagnose this situation for years without considering solutions? Mr. Vice President, the significant deterioration of human rights and international law is partly due to the failure of governments to fulfill their commitments. Following the renewed clashes in Tigray and the rising tensions in Amhara, civilians have been the primary victims. A drone attack on the 25th of November 2025, which targeted a healthcare facility in the North Swallow area of Amhara, resulted in the deaths of nearly 13 civilians and injuries to others. Additionally, the Ethiopian government continues to increase restrictions on independent NGOs ahead of the national elections scheduled for June 2026. These practices are just a small part of the widespread violations committed by the current Ethiopian government. Therefore, we call upon states to pressure the Ethiopian government to immediately stop the violence in Tigray and Amhara. We also believe it's time to re-establish an independent investigation mechanism to document the serious human rights violations in Ethiopia and ensure accountability and justice. I thank you.
Muchas gracias. El siguiente orador, Tamil Style, entiendo que se encuentra ausente. Cedo la palabra a Akshar Foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Distinguished delegates. Inclusive regional development is integral to the realization of human rights, particularly economic, social, and cultural rights, including the right to development. Strengthening public institutions and expanding access to essential services are central to advancing equity, participation, and social cohesion. India's northeast region is among the most culturally and ethnically diverse areas in the world, with rich linguistic and indigenous traditions. After decades of relative neglect, in recent years, sustained public engagement and targeted investment have supported infrastructure development, institutional expansion, and improved access to education, healthcare, and connectivity across the region. The Government of India has emphasized regional integration through investments in public infrastructure and higher education institutions, alongside initiatives aimed at employment generation, skill development, and sustainable livelihoods. As an education organization headquartered in Assam, Akshar Foundation has observed the positive impact of strengthened institutional presence and increased public investment in fostering opportunity and social stability to the benefit of the children we serve. To encourage even further progress, we urge the Human Rights Council to acknowledge the success of India's regionally inclusive development strategies that integrate infrastructure, institutional strengthening, and participatory governance in line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la Fundación Patiala por video.
Mr. President, I speak today to raise awareness about a right that is simple, yet powerful, the right to safe mobility. Every person has the right to travel without risking their life. Every year, road crashes take millions of lives across the world. These deaths are preventable. Road safety is not just a transport issue, it's a human rights issue. It is directly linked to the right to life and right to health. In India, we now treat road safety as a national priority. Through initiatives like Sadak Suraksha Abhiyan 2026, road safety is seen as a shared responsibility, a civic duty. India's efforts have also been recognized internationally, including the Prince Michel International Road Safety Award. But government action alone is not enough. Civil societies play a vital role. At the Patiala Foundation, through our project Sadak, we support UN Sustainable Development Goals 3 and 11, good health and safer cities. Our work is simple and practical. We have made over 27,000 cyclists safer by providing reflective stickers. We created the Children Chalan book, empowering children to promote road discipline in their families and communities. We conduct road safety audits and promote safe school zones so that children can travel to school safely. We work for every person, including the person with disabilities, who has the right to travel without risking their life. When a breadwinner dies in a road crash, a family can fall into poverty overnight. Preventing crashes protects not just lives, but livelihoods and dignity. India's experience shows that when governments and civil society works together, change is possible. We urge this council to recognize road safety as a human rights priority. No one should have to risk their life simply to move from one place to another. Thank you, Mr. President.
Gracias. Cedo la palabra para una declaración conjunta a World Organization of the Scout Movement.
Thank you, Mr. President. I speak on behalf of the NGO Working Group on Human Rights Education and Learning. This year marks 15 years since the adoption of the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights Education and Training, a milestone that invites both celebration and reflection. While important progress has been made, the promise of the Declaration remains far from fully realized. We urge states to strengthen the implementation of the fifth phase of the World Programme for Human Rights Education. This phase offers a critical opportunity to strengthen national systems, empower educators, and ensure that learners of all ages acquire the knowledge, skills, and values needed to uphold human rights in practice. The Universal Periodic Review remains a cornerstone for accountability and mutual learning. Civil society plays a vital role in bringing lived realities into the review and supporting implementation on the ground. At a time when recent decisions by some states to disengage risk weakening our collective efforts, protecting meaningful civil society participation is more important than ever. In this fragile civic context, marked by unrest, polarization, and misinformation, human rights education is key. It equips people to think critically, engage peacefully, and participate meaningfully in public life. We call on all states to invest in inclusive, well-resourced, and participatory human rights education in close partnership with civil society educators and communities. The future of human rights depends on states upholding their commitments and working to ensure that human rights education becomes a reality for all. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a International Movement for Advancement of Education, Culture, Social and Economic Development. Ausente. Cedo la palabra a la Agence Suisse pour le Développement et les Droits de l'Homme.
Mr. Vice President, in light of rapid technological transformation, the digital space has become an integral part of children's lives worldwide, making the protection of their digital rights and the safeguarding of their safety and privacy an international priority. The Convention on the Rights of the Child 1989 affirms the child's right to access information and to non-discrimination, rights that extend to the digital environment. Furthermore, General Comment number 25/2021 of the Committee of the Rights of the Child emphasizes the need to update national legislation to protect children from harmful content exploitation and violation of privacy in the digital context. While the digital space offers significant opportunities for learning and innovation, it also exposes children to risks such as cyberbullying, sexual exploitation, and the misuse of personal data. In this regard, we commend the efforts of the United Arab Emirates and its wise leadership in promoting children's rights to learning and innovation within a safe digital environment. The UAE issued Federal Decree Law number 26 of 2025 on the Child Digital Safety, which entered into force in January 2026, establishing a comprehensive legal framework to protect children and enhance their awareness of the responsible use of modern technologies. Accordingly, we recommend that the System Council encourage states to update their legislation, strengthen institutional capacities, support international partnerships, and prepare periodic reports to measure progress achieved with a view to ensuring a safe digital environment that supports children's growth and well-being. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a Merja Zarka.
سيدي الرئيس، يشير تقرير آفاق واتجاهات التوظيف العالمية 2026 الصادر عن منظمة العمل الدولية إلى أن سوق العمل العالمي يتجه نحو حالة من الاستقرار النسبي بعد سنوات من الاضطرابات، إلا أن نمو الإنتاجية لا يزال دون المستويات المطلوبة لدعم خلق فرص عمل لائقة، مما يستدعي دعم كل منهما في ظل مظلة للحماية باعتبارها ركائز أساسية لتحقيق نمو اقتصادي شامل ومستدام. سيدي الرئيس، لقد برزت دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة كبيئة رائدة وجاذبة للعمالة مع زيادة سنوية في أعداد العمال الوافدة منذ أعوام، ما يعكس ثقة عالمية راسخة في بيئة عمل توفر الحماية الاجتماعية والإنصاف والفرص العادلة. فقد بلغت نسبة العمالة المسجلة بالقطاع الخاص في نظام حماية الأجور 99%، ونسبة العاملين المسجلين في نظام التأمين ضد التعطل عن العمل 90%، كما بلغت قيمة التعويضات التي حصل عليها من فقدوا وظائفهم أكثر من 350 مليون درهم خلال عامي 2024 و2025. وإننا نحث مجلسكم الموقر على دعم تعزيز التعاون الدولي لتبادل الخبرات وأفضل الممارسات في إدارة أسواق العمل وتكثيف التوعية بحقوق العمال ومسؤولياتهم، مع الاستثمار في الحلول الرقمية لتطوير آليات التفتيش وتسريع تسوية المنازعات. شكرا سيدي الرئيس.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a Visión Mundial de la Santé, VIMS. Ausente. Cedo la palabra a Socialist International.
Mr. Vice President, at the time when the world is in turmoil, when the international relations are strained and the rule of law is too often ignored, the Socialist International reaffirms its belief in a world that respects human rights and the rights of peoples, is dedicated to protecting and reinforcing our democracy. We stand on international relations grounded in principles, not force, in multilateral cooperation and for a global order in which genocide, whether in Gaza, Palestine, Darfur, Sudan, or Rohingya, Myanmar, are prevented and punished. This vision is not naive. It is grounded in hard lessons of history. It is in this spirit that Socialist International, in this last meeting in Malta, November 2025, adopted a resolution on the situation in and around Nagorno-Karabakh, asserting that the conflict cannot be resolved by military means, and for the process to be successful, it must include collective, voluntary, safe, and international guaranteed return of those displaced for Nagorno-Karabakh. The Socialist International, as global organization in these troubled, uncertain times, reiterate the need for respect and compliance with international law and the United Nations Charter, and consider their violation and all unilateral acts of war to be unacceptable. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a África Cultura Internacional.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Africa Culture International remercie la représentante spéciale pour son engagement envers la protection des enfants touchés par les conflits armés. Malgré les efforts internationaux, l'enrôlement et l'utilisation d'enfants soldats continuent de toucher plusieurs régions du continent. En République démocratique du Congo, des milliers d'enfants restent exposés au recrutement forcé par des groupes armés non identifiés. Des situations similaires ont été documentées au Sahel, en République centrafricaine, au Soudan du Sud et dans les zones du bassin du lac Tchad. Ces enfants sont privés de leur droit fondamental à l'éducation, exposés à la violence extrême. Nous attirons l'attention du Conseil sur la situation préoccupante des enfants. Sur ce, des informations concordantes évoquent l'endoctrinement des mineurs dans des conditions particulièrement vulnérables. Des estimations relayées par plusieurs acteurs associatifs font état d'environ 8 000 enfants exposés à des pratiques d'embrigadement. Monsieur le Président, la protection des enfants doit rester une priorité absolue, indépendamment de toute considération politique. Nous appelons à renforcer les mécanismes de surveillance, à garantir un accès indépendant aux zones concernées et à soutenir les programmes de réhabilitation et de réintégration des enfants affectés par les conflits armés. Protéger un enfant, c'est protéger son avenir. Je vous remercie.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a American Association of Jurists.
Señor vicepresidente, alertamos sobre la expansión del lawfare en América Latina, la utilización del sistema judicial para la persecución política que genera detenciones arbitrarias, proscripciones políticas y violaciones al debido proceso, en contravención del Pacto Internacional de Derechos Civiles y Políticos y de la Convención Americana sobre Derechos Humanos. Diversos estudios caracterizan el lawfare como modalidad de guerra híbrida o no convencional. Observamos en la región que sectores del Poder Judicial, con conglomerados mediáticos e intereses económicos, se posicionan por encima de las instituciones democráticamente electas. Casos como el de Jorge Glass en Ecuador, detenido en violación a la Convención de Viena, que tiene condena cumplida, Pedro Castillo en Perú, Daniel Jadwe en Chile y en Argentina, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner y Julio de Vido, detenido por un supuesto delito leve, no probado y ya prescripto. Presentan graves indicios de detención arbitraria según los estándares del Grupo de Trabajo sobre la Detención Arbitraria. El presidente constitucional de Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, y la diputada Flores están secuestrados en el marco de crímenes de guerra cometidos por Estados Unidos. Corresponde al gobierno de los Estados Unidos poner fin a las medidas coercitivas unilaterales contra Cuba, Nicaragua y la República Bolivariana de Venezuela, violando la igualdad soberana de los Estados. Exhortamos al Consejo de Derechos Humanos y relatores especiales a que presten atención a las situaciones expuestas en el marco de sus mandatos.
Muchas gracias. Con esta última intervención damos por concluido el debate general sobre el tema 3. Continuaremos ahora con las declaraciones en ejercicio del derecho de réplica en relación con el debate general sobre el tema 3 de la agenda. Doy ahora la palabra al distinguido representante de Argentina.
Señor presidente, realizo esta intervención con relación a los diálogos con los relatores de derecho a la privacidad y de lucha contra el terrorismo y en respuesta al nutrido elenco de críticas falaces pronunciadas por el CELS, organismo no gubernamental de oposición al gobierno nacional sin importar el tema del que se trate, todos presentados bajo el supuesto prisma de problemas perfectos, expandiendo su oratoria hasta llenar el tiempo disponible. Señor presidente, es importante recordar que en toda democracia hay una búsqueda constante de equilibrios entre la libertad y la seguridad. La primera define quiénes somos como sociedad, mientras que la segunda garantiza que esa libertad puede existir en la vida real sin temores ni perturbaciones para los ciudadanos de bien. Nuestra Constitución garantiza el derecho a la protesta, la libertad de expresión y los derechos de los pueblos indígenas. Nadie en nuestro país puede ser perseguido por sus ideas, por su identidad o por sus reclamos políticos. Pero también existe una línea que ninguna democracia puede permitir que se cruce, y es la que separa la protesta legítima de la violencia organizada. En primer lugar, sobre lo que mencionó esa organización, es importante destacar que las garantías constitucionales en la Argentina lucen en su máximo esplendor. Las normas que prohíben la inteligencia política siguen plenamente vigentes, así como los controles parlamentarios y judiciales previstos por la ley. Por otra parte, la coordinación entre los organismos del Estado para enfrentar amenazas a la seguridad nacional es una práctica normal y habitual en cualquier democracia moderna. Esto es tan obvio que no merece ni siquiera mencionarse. En segundo lugar, la legislación argentina sobre el combate al terrorismo no criminaliza la protesta ni las reivindicaciones sociales. Solo establece criterios claros y se aplica cuando existen actos graves de violencia destinados a generar el terror o a coaccionar a las autoridades públicas. Quizá esa organización, en un ataque de amnesia selectiva, se haya olvidado de las 2 bombas plantadas en Buenos Aires en el año 92 y 94, cuya responsabilidad la justicia argentina asignó al terrorismo internacional y que costó la vida a más de 100 argentinos. O quizá piense que en estos momentos nos encontramos en la cima de la paz histórica mundial. Estos actos, señor presidente, y muchos otros, como los incendios provocados que puedan amenazar la vida o los bienes de los residentes argentinos, ¿cómo pretende que los llamemos, señor presidente? Lo invito a que hagamos un ejercicio de buscar otros calificativos. Quizá pueda llamarse un acto de incalculable solidaridad o de profunda caridad social. Señor presidente, frente a los actos terroristas solo hay dos opciones: condenarlos o protegerlos haciendo gala de una formidable complicidad. Puedo garantizarle, el gobierno del presidente Milei seguirá defendiendo con firmeza las libertades civiles y jamás va a utilizar el mapa del CELS para guiar los destinos del pueblo argentino que ha decidido desde su nacimiento vivir en paz, en orden y en libertad. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de la República Islámica del Irán.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President, my delegation exercised its right of reply to respond to certain allegations raised during this session and to place on record our serious concern regarding the current situation. The United States and the Israeli regime have imposed a large and unjustifiable war on our region. They bear full responsibility for the current situation as they initiated a clear act of aggression against Iran in violation of the fundamental principles of international law. The prohibition of the use of force under Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the Charter of the United Nations is not a selective obligation. When these foundational principles is openly violated, the targeted state has no choice but to exercise its inherent right of self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. Since 28 February 2026, Iran has been subjected to indiscriminate attack against its territory and its people. At the same time, Iran has been unjustly blamed for the malicious action of others who consistently seek to distort the reality of the region. As expressly affirmed by the authorities of Iran, any point of origin, base, or territorial platform from which acts of aggression against Iran are initiated, irrespective of the state in which such force may be stationed, shall, consistent with Article 3 of the Annex to General Assembly Resolution 3314 and the definition of aggression, be regarded as a lawful military objective in the exercise of Iran's inherent right of self-defense. Finally, we wish to convey a clear message to our neighboring country. Iran has never attacked and will never attack the territory of its neighboring country. We are fully aware of your position. However, this war was imposed on Iran, and Iran cannot be subjected to acts of aggression while being expected to remain silent and refrain from defending itself. Iran has strongly urged all countries not to allow their territory to be misused for attacks against the Iranian people and its territory. I thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Túnez.
شكرا السيد نائب الرئيس. يتناول وفد بلادي الكلمة لممارسة حق الرد على ما ورد في مداخلة المنظمة غير الحكومية International Commission of Jurists وغيرها من مغالطات ومعطيات غير صحيحة، ونود تقديم التوضيحات التالية. نؤكد بداية أننا نرفض محاولات هذه المنظمة غير الحكومية للتشكيك في مسار إصلاح القضاء في تونس والتدخل في سير القضاء الذي يستطيع بمهامه في إطار الاستقلالية وطبقا للقوانين النافذة والإجراءات القانونية السليمة وفي كنف احترام حقوق الإنسان وخاصة حق الدفاع، ويستند في أحكامه إلى تحقيقات دقيقة ومعمقة ولأدلة ثابتة. ونؤكد في هذا الصدد على أن أي محاولة للضغط على القضاء التونسي بالترويج للمغالطات وعبر منابر أجنبية خدمة لأهداف سياسية أو غيرها ستبقى غير مجدية. نشدد على أن مثل هذه المنظمات غير الحكومية غير مؤهلة وغير مخولة لإصدار أحكام مسبقة وتضليلية في شأن قضايا قيد النظر من القضاء التونسي أو لتنصيب نفسها لإصدار الأحكام بدلا عن المحاكم التونسية ذات الاختصاص أو لتقييمها، ونرفض سوء استغلال منبر مجلس حقوق الإنسان لهذه الغاية. كما نستغرب أن تصدر هذه المغالطات من منظمة تعلن أنها لجنة حقوقيين. السيد نائب الرئيس، تحرص تونس على احترام وتعزيز حقوق الإنسان والحريات طبقا لدستورها وتشريعها الوطني والتزاماتها الدولية، وقد اعتمدت الدولة مسارا إصلاحيا لتركيز ديمقراطية حقيقية ودولة سيادة قانون استجابة لمطالب الشعب التونسي في الإصلاح والمحاسبة والقضاء على الفساد. كما تحرص تونس على إصلاح القضاء حتى يتمكن من الاطلاع بالدور المناط بعهدته في تحقيق العدالة وحماية حقوق المواطنين في كنف النزاهة والمساواة والحياد وعدم التسييس، حيث يمثل إصلاح القضاء وتطهيره من الفساد مطلبا أساسيا للشعب التونسي وأولوية عاجلة للدولة التونسية، كي يتسنى البت في جرائم خطيرة ألقت بظلالها على العشرية السابقة لجويل 2021، وعلى رأسها الاغتيالات السياسية والجرائم الإرهابية وقضايا التسفير إلى بؤر التوتر، والتي عجز القضاء خلال العشرية المذكورة عن كشف حقيقتها وتحقيق العدالة فيها بسبب اختراقه سابقا من أطراف سياسية وجهات مختلفة. وتتم الملاحقات القضائية وفقا للإجراءات والقوانين التونسية وفي احترام كامل لحقوق الإنسان وحقوق الدفاع وكافة الضمانات القانونية. وشكرا السيد نائب الرئيس.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Indonesia.
Thank you. Mr. Vice President, Indonesia wishes to exercise its right of reply to the statement delivered by an NGO yesterday during the general debate under item 3 regarding the national strategic project in Merauke. Allow me to underline that this initiative forms part of Indonesia's broader national efforts to strengthen food security while supporting inclusive development in Papua. For Indonesia, ensuring a stable and sustainable food supply is a matter of national resilience, but also closely linked to the realization of the right to food and right to development of our people, including local communities in the provinces of Papua, particularly in a global context that is exacerbated by growing food insecurity and disruption to supply chains. At the same time, these initiatives are intended to contribute to local development through the improvement of infrastructure, the creation of employment opportunities, and the strengthening of supporting industries, including initiatives related to agricultural value chains and bioenergy development. Indonesia's legal systems provide avenues for communities to raise concerns and seek review of administrative decisions before competent courts. Such mechanisms are an integral part of the rule of law and democratic governance. Our government continues to emphasize responsible land use planning, environmental safeguards, and engagement with local communities in the implementation of these development initiatives. It is our commitment to ensure that development initiatives are implemented in accordance with the national legislation and procedures. Indonesia remains to constructive dialogue and engagement, including with civil society organizations and local communities, with a view to ensuring that these development initiatives continue to promote the well-being of communities while upholding our shared commitment to human rights. I thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de China. China has the floor.
副主席先生，个别非政府组织滥用人权理事会平台，打着人权幌子，肆意编造、散布虚假信息，攻击抹黑中国人权状况， 中方对此强烈反对和坚决拒绝。当前西藏经济不断发展，社会持续稳定，各族人民宗教信仰自由、言论自由等各项权利得到充分保障。中国宪法明确保障公民的宗教信仰自由，修订实施的宗教事务条例，强化了对公民宗教信仰自由的维护。藏传佛教、伊斯兰教和天主教等多种宗教在西藏长期并存，雪顿节、燃灯节、萨嘎达瓦节、转山转湖等1700多项宗教民俗活动循例举行。每年到拉萨朝佛敬香的信教群众达100万次，信教群众宗教需求得到充分满足。中国是法治国家，法律面前人人平等，公安机关依法办理，司法机关严格依法审理有关案件。在这一过程中，当事人及其辩护律师依法享有的各项权利得到充分保障。有关非政府组织在人权理事会恶意炒作有关问题，真实意图是给犯罪分子洗白开脱，所作所为与促进和保护人权毫无关系。这种恶劣行径应当遭到国际社会的唾弃，必须予以严肃问责。近年来，很多外国朋友赴西藏参访，见证了西藏社会稳定、经济发展、民族团结、宗教和睦的真实景象。我们希望那些不明真相者摒弃偏见和臆想，亲自到西藏走一走、看一看，了解真实的西藏，感受西藏的发展。在事实真相面前，谎言将不攻自破。谢谢副主席先生。
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Sudán.
شكرا السيد نائب الرئيس. وفد السودان يقدم هذا البيان في إطار ممارسة حق الرد على ما ورد بشأن السودان في بيان منظمة أسوسيسيون دون تغديد ميديكال غيني، والذي تضمن اتهامات لا أساس لها من الصحة ضد القوات المسلحة السودانية. نؤكد سيد الرئيس حرص حكومة السودان وجيشها الوطني على حماية المدنيين، كما نؤكد التزام القوات المسلحة بمبادئ القانون الدولي الإنساني المعروفة في إدارة عملياتها العسكرية. إن القوانين واللوائح المنظمة تحظر بشكل قاطع تجنيد واستخدام الأطفال. نرفض الادعاءات التي تم ترديدها بشأن تجنيد الأطفال من قبل القوات المسلحة، ونشير إلى أن هذه الممارسات هي في الواقع من السمات المعروفة لسلوك ومنهجية الميليشيا الإرهابية المتمردة التي ظلت تجند الأطفال وتزج بهم في الأعمال القتالية، كما ورد في التقارير التي عدتها المفوضية السامية لحقوق الإنسان. كما أن الادعاءات المتعلقة باستهداف المدنيين تتناقض مع الواقع على الأرض، حيث ظلت المناطق الخاضعة لسيطرة الحكومة هي المستقرة التي تتوفر فيها الحماية والخدمات الأساسية للمدنيين، بخلاف المناطق التي تنتشر فيها الميليشيا الإرهابية، لا سيما في إقليم دارفور، حيث تتفاقم الانتهاكات وعمليات التهجير القسري والتطهير العرقي وغيرها من الانتهاكات. ويود السودان التأكيد أن بعض المنظمات للأسف الشديد تستقل حقها في المشاركة في هذا المنبر لكي تتبنى ادعاءات الميليشيا المتمردة ضد القوات المسلحة السودانية، مما يجعلها أبواقا لها في منحى تسييسي مفضوح وخرق صارخ لقرار 31/1996 الذي يحكم عمل المنظمات غير الحكومية. إن تبني وترويج سرديات ذات أجندة مغرضة تفتقر إلى الحياد والموضوعية يتناقض مع المبادئ التي يقوم عليها عمل هذا المجلس الموقر. ولذلك فإن السودان سوف يتخذ ما يلزم من إجراءات عبر لجنة المنظمات غير الحكومية بالأمم المتحدة. فيما يلي ما ورد في بيان المنظمة الدولية للدول الأقل نموا، نشير إلى حرص حكومة السودان على تسهيل وصول المساعدات الإنسانية انطلاقا من مسؤولياتها تجاه شعبها، بما فيها المناطق التي تنتشر فيها الميليشيا المتمردة في دارفور. ونؤكد بأن حكومة الأمل في السودان مكونة من كفاءات مدنية ولا تمثل أي جهة سياسية محددة، وتسعى بحرص شديد على اجتياز البلاد للمرحلة الانتقالية نحو حكومة منتخبة، وأن الجيش السوداني مؤسسة وطنية مهنية تقوم بواجبها الدستوري الوطني في حماية البلاد وشعبها ولا تمثل أي جهة سياسية. شكرا السيد نائب الرئيس.
Muchas gracias. ¿Hay alguna otra delegación que desee ejercer el derecho de réplica? No veo ninguna. Ahora haremos un breve receso y volveremos a reunirnos en un par de minutos para abrir el tema 4 de la agenda y llevar a cabo el diálogo interactivo con la Comisión Internacional Independiente de Investigación sobre Ucrania. Excelencias, distinguidos participantes, declaro abierto el tema 4 del orden del día, titulado Situaciones de Derechos Humanos que requieren la atención del Consejo. Comenzaremos ahora el diálogo interactivo con la Comisión Internacional Independiente de Investigación sobre Ucrania. Me complace dar la bienvenida a los miembros de la Comisión, el señor Eric Moos, presidente, el señor Pablo de Grave y la señora Vrinda Grover. La lista de oradores se cerrará en 15 minutos. Tiene la palabra el señor Eric Moos, presidente de la Comisión Internacional Independiente de Investigación, para presentar el informe.
Distinguished President, Excellencies, together with my colleagues Pablo de Grave and Vrinda Grover, I am pleased to brief the Human Rights Council on the most recent report of the Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine. During our fourth mandate, we have, in addition to the mandatory reports, published 2 conference room papers, one in May 25 about attacks on civilians with short-range drones, and another one this week about deportation and forcible transfer of Ukrainian children. 4 years of armed conflict in Ukraine have had a devastating impact on civilians. Over 15,000 civilians have been killed and over 41,000 injured since the Russian Federation full-scale invasion in 2022, according to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, with an increase of 31% of casualties in 2025. Relentless attacks with explosive weapons in populated areas have led to death, injury, damage, and destruction. Massive attacks targeted the country's energy infrastructure during this particularly cold winter, caused unbearable living conditions. The Commission's findings over 4 mandates provide a disturbing account of violations and crime, the scale, magnitude, and gravity of which have increased over time. In our investigations, we had relied on close to 2,500 interviews and thousands of documents. In November 2025, the Commission traveled to Ukraine, and the investigators went twice during this mandate. Having said this, our Secretariat remains severely affected by the liquidity crisis at the United Nations. As always, we extend our gratitude to those who have shared valuable information with us. We are grateful for the cooperation of the government of Ukraine. The Commission regrets that the Russian Federation has not responded to any of its 39 written requests, including questions concerning the investigated cases. Distinguished President, Excellencies, in previous reports, we already established that the Russian authorities' unlawful deportation of children from areas they occupied in Ukraine to the Russian Federation and the transfer to other areas they occupied in Ukraine amount to war crimes. Through continuing investigations, the Commission has now verified the deportation and transfer of 1,205 children and is aware of many other cases. Where possible, the Commission has tracked the further movements and whereabouts of the children. Deportations and transfers started shortly before the full-scale invasion from areas in 5 occupied oblasts of Ukraine and occurred coercively. 4 years later, 80% of these children have not returned. Many parents, legal guardians, or relatives are still looking for them. Instead of establishing a mechanism to facilitate the children's return, Russian authorities at various levels have coordinated legal and practical actions to arrange for their long-term placement with families or in institution in 21 regions of the Russian Federation and in occupied areas of Ukraine. In 2022, the Russian authorities repeatedly declared that they prioritized adoption. The evidence collected shows that these acts have been committed following a carefully organized plan and pursuant to a policy conceived and executed at the highest level of the Russian government and regional authorities, including in occupied territories. The scale and the scope of these crimes have led the Commission to conclude that Russian authorities have deported and forcibly transferred children as a crime against humanity. In most cases investigated, Russian authorities have not informed the parents or legal guardians of the fate and whereabouts of the deported children. Families remained unaware of the fate of the children for prolonged periods of time. This has led to lengthy separation, distress, and suffering. These acts have been widespread and systematic, committed as a matter of policy, and amount to enforced disappearance as a crime against humanity. Our report also describes the conduct of trials by Russian Federation courts in the context of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Civilians and prisoners of war from Ukraine were mainly charged with terrorism, espionage, and violent seizure of power, and convicted to severe sentences, including life imprisonment. The Russian authorities have systematically fabricated the evidence presented during trial, often obtained by torture. The courts have also disregarded fair trial guarantees. The verdicts aligned with the case of the prosecution, as the guilt of the accused was assumed from the outset, demonstrating a lack of independence and impartiality of the courts. The Commission has concluded that the Russian authorities have committed grave breaches of international humanitarian law, which constitute war crimes. The Commission has continued to document cases of sexual violence committed by Russian armed forces. In one case, a girl as young as 13 years was the victim of rape. In another, a woman had a child as a result of rape. The Commission further investigated the recruitment of foreign nationals from 17 globally dispersed countries to fight together with the Russian armed forces. Many of them have been deceived and lured from abroad to the Russian Federation with false promises of work. They were coerced to sign contracts they did not understand and were then sent to the front lines. We also investigated the treatment of troops within the Russian armed forces. The Commission interviewed 85 soldiers who had deserted. Most of them testified about extreme violence and coercion being arbitrarily ordered or practiced by the commanders. Soldiers described being treated like cannon fodder or disposable material, sent on so-called meat assaults without preparation, equipment, evacuation plan, and forced to advance at all costs. They reported shooting of soldiers, mock executions, severe beatings, tying soldiers to trees, and detention in pits. Their testimonies demonstrate a total disregard for human life and dignity. Turning to Ukraine, the Commission recalled the prevailing legal uncertainty resulting from the overbroad definition of collaborative activities in criminal legislation. Rulings of the Ukrainian Supreme Court illustrate the risk that activities pertaining to essential services to the population may fall within the scope of that provision. The Commission also documented the violations reported during mobilization for the Ukrainian armed forces. These include irregular administrative detention, lack of access to a lawyer, and hurried medical examinations. Instances of violence have been recorded against conscientious objectors, regardless of their expressed readiness to carry out alternative civil service. Distinguished President, Excellencies, as the armed conflict continues, the Commission has continued to document a wide array of crimes and violations with a severe impact on civilians. Victims have many acute needs which require prompt and comprehensive response. Survivor-centered and child and gender-sensitive support mechanisms are key to providing much-needed assistance for victims and their families. The Commission also reiterates the importance of judicial and non-judicial accountability as a means to fulfill the rights of the victims. Thank you.
Muchas gracias al señor Eric Moos. De acuerdo con nuestra práctica, comenzaremos escuchando a las delegaciones de los países concernidos. Se me ha informado que la delegación de la Federación de Rusia no desea hacer uso de la palabra en este momento. Cedo ahora la palabra al distinguido representante de Ucrania. Tiene usted 5 minutos.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ukraine appreciates the fruitful work of the Independent International Commission on Inquiry. We attach great importance to the findings reflected in the Commission's comprehensive report and conference room paper, both of which were presented to the Council today. These findings once again indicate a grim reality. Russia continues to commit grave violations of international law as part of its ongoing war of aggression against Ukraine. One of Russia's most shocking crimes documented by the Commission is the deportation and transfer of Ukrainian children. The Commission has verified the deportation or transfer of at least 1,205 Ukrainian children. Yet this figure represents only a small part of the full scale of the crime and reflects only those cases that the Commission has been able to examine. These children were taken to the Russian Federation, placed in institutions or in adoption families across various regions and given Russian citizenship. The Commission's findings are clear. These deportations are not so-called evacuations, the term that Russia has used, but organized transfers carried out as a part of a coordinated plan. The Commission concludes that Russian authorities perpetrated these actions under the widespread and systematic policy orchestrated at the highest level of the Russian state, including personally by President Putin. Therefore, Russia's deportation and transfer of Ukrainian children constitute both war crimes and crimes against humanity. The victims of these crimes cannot be seen as collateral damage of the war. Instead, we are dealing with one of Russia's deliberate strategies aimed at destroying the future and the very fabric of the Ukrainian society, erasing Ukrainian identity. Russia's authorities have been tasked with assimilating and indoctrinating Ukrainian children. The international community must treat these crimes with full seriousness. Russia must provide full information about the deportees' whereabouts and immediately return every stolen child. Mr. President, the Commission's report also exposes systematic abuse of the Russian justice system as a tool of repression. The Commission examined dozens of trials conducted by Russian courts against Ukrainian civilians and prisoners of war. The conclusion is unequivocal. These are not judicial trials, but staged proceedings. Confessions are extracted through torture. Evidence is fabricated. Verdicts are predetermined. Russia deports Ukrainian civilians to be prosecuted in a foreign jurisdiction. Ukrainian prisoners of war are denied their protected status under international humanitarian law. These practices constitute grave violation of the Geneva Conventions and are war crimes. The Commission has also documented continued sexual and gender-based violence committed by Russian forces. This includes rape and sexual torture against civilians and detainees. These crimes are part of a broader pattern of brutality that Russia uses to terrorize civilians and assert control over the Ukrainian areas it temporarily occupies. Mr. President, while unthinkable in the 21st century, the Russian state has always, throughout its entire existence, relied on the pattern of behavior to subdue the nations it set out to conquer, or should I say integrate. The Commission's findings presented today demonstrate once again that Russia's aggression against Ukraine is accompanied by systematic and widespread violations of international law. These crimes must lead to accountability. To ensure accountability for those who launched the war, Ukraine continues to work with its partners to establish a special tribunal for the crime of aggression against my country. Concurrently, we are advancing international efforts to ensure compensation for the victims, including by way of establishment of an international claims commission. Russia must be brought to comprehensive justice for the crime of aggression, for war crimes, and for crimes against humanity. Accountability is essential not only for Ukraine, but for the credibility of the entire international legal order. Ukraine therefore calls on members of this Council to continue supporting the work of the Commission and to ensure the renewal of its mandate. Justice for the victims must prevail. Multiple lessons drawn not only from history but also from today's events show that impunity always encourages future crimes. Everyone present here knows this very well, and I'm sure everyone here would like to see the vicious circle of crime broken. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Ahora escucharemos un mensaje en video del representante de la Institución Nacional de Derechos Humanos de categoría A de Ucrania, el comisionado del Parlamento ucraniano para los Derechos Humanos.
Members of the Commission, I thank you for your principled and critically important work in documenting the crimes of the Russian Federation. For almost 12 years now, Russia has been conducting a deliberate war aimed at the destroying of the Ukrainian people. This is not a series of isolated incidents. It is a systematic, state-driven policy of terror. To date, more than 200,000 crimes of aggression and war crimes have been documented. About 15,000 civilians have been killed. 679 children have lost their lives, and thousands more have been injured. And these are only the confirmed figures. The real numbers are significantly higher. Every day, Russia carries out large-scale coordinated strikes against Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Their purpose is to create humanitarian catastrophe. Millions of people are left without electricity, heating and water in the middle of winter at minus 20 degrees under constant shelling. Cold, darkness and fear are used by Russia as weapons. In just 1 month, January, Russia launched more than 6,000 drones, nearly 5,500 guided aerial bombs, and 158 missiles at the territory of Ukraine. In February, a Russian drone struck a bus carrying miners. 12 people were killed on their way home from work. This was not an exception. This is the everyday reality of Russian terror. In the temporarily occupied territories, torture, killings, abductions, and the deportation of children have become routine practice. Where the Russian army appears, the rule of law disappears. It is replaced by a repressive occupation regime. Ukrainian soldiers held in Russian captivity are detained in inhuman conditions. More than 95% of them are subjected to systematic and brutal torture, cruelty that is difficult even to imagine. This is not chaos. It is a deliberate, constructed system. I urge the Commission to continue documenting every crime, every strike, and every killing, providing each one with proper legal assessment, and demanding a resolute international response. The Russian Federation must be accountable for full and inevitable responsibility for all crimes committed.
Muchas gracias. Invito ahora a las delegaciones interesadas a formular preguntas a los miembros de la Comisión de Investigación y a formular observaciones sobre el informe. El tiempo de uso de la palabra es de 1 minuto y 30 segundos para todos. En primer lugar, la distinguida representación de Estonia en nombre de un grupo de países, cedo la palabra a Su Excelencia, señor Margus Tsanka, Ministro de Relaciones Exteriores de Estonia, a través de un mensaje de video.
Mr. President, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Nordic Baltic states. The leaders of our states visited Kiev in 24th February as an act of solidarity and support to Ukraine. 2025 was the deadliest year for civilians in Ukraine since the start of Russia's war of aggression. Russia continues to demonstrate that they are not interested in peace, including by intensifying targeted attacks against Ukraine's energy and other civilian infrastructure. We are deeply alarmed by the Commission's conclusion that the deportation and forcible transfer of Ukrainian children is carried out pursuant to a pre-established state policy coordinated at the highest levels. We remain committed to working relentlessly with all partners to ensure their safe return. Equally concerning are the findings about systematic violations of fair trial guarantees and the fabrication of evidence, including through torture and coercion. We thank the Commission for its vital work in documenting all serious violations by Russian authorities. There must be accountability for violations of international law. We will actively work towards the rapid establishment of a comprehensive compensation mechanism, including the Special Tribunal for the Crime of Aggression.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de la Unión Europea.
The European Union thanks the Commission for its report. The EU condemns in the strongest possible terms Russia's continuing violations of international law in Ukraine. The EU calls on Russia to immediately end the grave violations of child deportation and forcible transfer, which, according to the Commission of Inquiry, amount to crimes against humanity and war crimes. We call on Russia to stop the illegal adoption of Ukrainian children and to ensure their immediate and safe return to Ukraine. According to the Commission, Russian authorities have failed to disclose the whereabouts of many children to their parents or legal guardians, actively obstructing their return. The report states that instead of facilitating repatriation, authorities have sought children's long-term placement with families or institutions in Russia, including through adoption. 80% of the children have not yet returned. We call on Russia to stop the militarization and indoctrination of Ukrainian minors and youth. The EU is committed in ensuring accountability for international crimes and human rights violations stemming from Russia's war of aggression. We remain committed for a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine, grounded in the UN Charter and international law. Now the key question, could the Commission elaborate on the use of foreign fighters by Russia, please?
Gracias. La lista de oradores se encuentra cerrada. Cedo la palabra a continuación a la distinguida representación de Albania en nombre de un grupo de países.
Mr. Vice President, I am pleased to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group of Friends of Accountability following the aggression against Ukraine. Throughout the last 4 years, the Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine has continued to report credible evidence of serious violations of international human rights law and international humanitarian law committed by Russian authorities. We remain appalled by continued reports that Ukrainians have endured grave suffering at the hands of Russian forces, including torture and other cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment. Russia continued to strike civilian and energy infrastructure, leaving millions without heating, electricity and water in very harsh winter in Ukraine. We are also alarmed by the recent report of the Commission of Inquiry, concluding that the deportation and forcible transfer of children from 5 oblasts in Ukraine amount to crime against humanity. The Group of Friends reiterates its unwavering commitment to support efforts aimed to bringing the perpetrators to justice and preventing further crimes in context of Russia's aggression against Ukraine, including the ICC investigation. In 2025, the legal foundation for the Special Tribunal for the Crime of Aggression against Ukraine and the International Claims Commission was led. We encourage all states to continue engaging with these efforts. We will continue to work collectively to uphold accountability and to ensure justice and lasting peace for Ukraine. I thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Czechia.
Mr. Vice President, the Czech Republic thanks the commissioners for their report. Their work once again shows that Russian aggression, international violence and disrespect for international law have no red lines. We strongly condemn the forcible deportation and transfer of Ukrainian civilians, notably children, from occupied territories. We call on Russia to immediately return all deported Ukrainian children. As indicated in the report, these acts constitute crimes against humanity, amount to war crimes and other violations of international humanitarian law and international human rights law. Moreover, the Russian authorities have been following consistent and organized plan and modus operandi and pre-established policy conceived at the highest state level. We remain deeply concerned about the fate of civilians and prisoners of war from Ukraine who are often subject of torture and ill treatment and who are facing fabricated charges in Russia where courts lack independence and impartiality. We call for immediate release of Ukrainian political prisoners Irina Danilovich, Halina Dovopola and Irina Horobtsova. Could the Commission elaborate on its cooperation with Russian authorities and possible means of reaching out to them? Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Eslovaquia.
Mr. President, Slovakia aligns itself with the EU statement and welcomes the report of the Commission of Inquiry. As a party to the Geneva Conventions and the Rome Statute, we emphasize the fundamental importance of upholding international humanitarian and human rights law. We are particularly concerned by the Commission's finding concerning the civilians in peril and the treatment of detainees. Violations of fair trials guarantees and the legal protection of individuals in custody are worrying. We are also alarmed by the findings concerning the transfer and deportation of children, the lack of transparency regarding their whereabouts, and the creation of a coercive environment that prevents their return to Ukraine require continued international attention. Furthermore, we condemn the reported violence during mobilization processes and the recruitment of foreign nationals through deceptive means. We recall the conclusions of the European Council reaffirming our strong commitment to ensuring full accountability for war crimes and the most serious crimes committed in connection with Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. Distinguished members of the Commission, how can the international community better coordinate to provide immediate support to release civilians, detainees and prisoners of war returning from captivity? I thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Alemania.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We align ourselves with the statements by the EU and by the Group of Friends of Accountability following the aggression against Ukraine. We thank the Commission of Inquiry for their latest report. Trauma inflicted upon Ukrainian children and their families, and accounts of torture and the systematic use of sexual and gender-based violence by Russia in the occupied territories of Ukraine make for another harrowing read. We are alarmed by Russia's wild strategy of deporting and forcibly transferring Ukrainians from occupied territory, especially children, indoctrinating them with propaganda and using them as cannon fodder against their own country. We are also concerned by Russia's practice of recruiting foreign nationals from Asian and African countries, often without their informed consent, to fight in Ukraine and become part of Russia's war machine. We condemn in the strongest possible terms Russia's violations and abuses of human rights and international humanitarian law. Perpetrators must be held accountable. The COI's work is a central step towards accountability. We ask all states to support the renewal of its mandate. Members of the COI, how can the international community better contribute to protecting victims of deportation and forced transfers, especially children? Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Macedonia del Norte.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. North Macedonia thanks the Commission of Inquiry for its continued work and for its latest report. The 24th of February marked 4 years since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, 4 years of suffering under foreign aggression. Over this period, the Commission has documented credible evidence of serious violation of IHL and IHRL committed by Russian authorities in the context of the ongoing aggression. These violations have had devastating and long-lasting consequences for civilians, in particular on women, girls and boys. We remain deeply concerned by continued reports that Ukrainians have been subjected to a cruel and inhuman treatment and enforced disappearances by Russian forces. Especially alarming are reports that children have been specifically targeted. The Commission's finding that the deportation and forcible transfer of more than 1,200 Ukrainian children are carried out pursuant to a pre-established and coordinated state policy of Russia are especially grave and may amount to crimes against humanity. Even more alarming fact is that 80% of these children are not returned. Furthermore, we note with grave concern the Commission's finding regarding sexual and gender-based violence by Russian forces, including cases involving girls aged 14 and 15. North Macedonia reiterates its unwavering commitment to ensuring accountability for the most serious crimes under international law and to supporting justice and a comprehensive and lasting peace for Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación del Consejo de Europa.
Honourable Mr. Vice President, on behalf of the Council of Europe, we welcome the important work of the Independent Commission of Inquiry and express our full support for its mandate to continue. The report presents continuously disturbing findings, including evidence of the unlawful deportation and forcible transfer of Ukrainian children by Russia in the context of its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In this regard, the European Court of Human Rights has established that Russia violated these children's right to private and family life, as well as their rights to liberty and security. The Court also called on Russia to cooperate in identifying transferred children and ensuring their reunification with their families. Regrettably, Russia has failed to cooperate in the execution of this judgment. The Council of Europe has taken further concrete steps to address the plight of Ukrainian children, including through the establishment of a dedicated claims category under the Register of Damage for Ukraine and the appointment of a special envoy of the Secretary General on the situation of children in Ukraine. We are also concerned by the Commission's findings regarding violations of the right to a fair trial for Ukrainian civilians and prisoners of war. Accountability remains essential, including through the swift ratifications of the Convention establishing an International Claims Commission for Ukraine. Finally, supporting the functioning of Ukraine's judiciary under wartime conditions remains a priority for the Council of Europe. I thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Albania.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Albania thanks the Commission of Inquiry for its report and expresses the full support for its mandate. The Commission's findings are clear and deeply alarming. It determined that serious violations of international humanitarian law and international human rights law have been committed in the context of Russia's aggression against Ukraine, and that some of these constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity. These crimes include, in particular, intentional attacks against civilians, murder, torture, sexual and gender-based violence, enforced disappearances, and arbitrary detention. The Commission also notes that the deportation and forced transfer of Ukrainian children were carried out in accordance with a state policy coordinated at the highest level and may constitute crimes against humanity. Albania strongly condemns these acts and calls for the immediate, safe and unconditional return of all transferred or deported children. We strongly condemn Russia's systematic attacks on populated areas in Ukraine and critical civilian infrastructure. Finally, Albania reiterates its unwavering support for Ukraine and affirms that any prospect and lasting peace must be based on respect for international law, the protection of civilians and justice. I thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Bulgaria.
Muchas gracias, señor vicepresidente. Bulgaria aligns with the EU statement and the statement of the Group of Friends of Accountability. We thank the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine for the update and its dedicated work. Bulgaria fully shares the Commission's conclusions that the Russian Federation has committed a crime against humanity by carrying out the forcible displacement and deportation of children from the illegally occupied territories of Ukraine. As a co-founder and committed member of the International Coalition for the Repatriation of Ukraine of illegally deported and forcibly displaced Ukrainian children, Bulgaria stands firmly and unequivocally behind every effort to secure their unconditional and immediate return. We note with profound regret that about 80% of the children documented by the Commission have not yet returned to their families. We call on the Russian authorities to immediately cease the practice of long-term settlement of Ukrainian children within institutions and families in the Russian Federation and to establish the necessary conditions for their swift and safe return to Ukraine. We reaffirm our strongest commitment to condemnation of all violations of international human rights law and international humanitarian law committed by the Russian Federation in the context of its full-scale war of aggression against Ukraine, reiterating our call for full accountability for the perpetrators. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Liechtenstein.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Liechtenstein thanks the Commission of Inquiry for the presentation of its report and for its essential work. 4 years after the Russian Federation's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, more than 15,000 civilian lives have been lost, with 2025 marking the deadliest year to date. As the war enters its 5th year, the Russian Federation continues to commit a multitude of serious and grave violations of international law. We are deeply alarmed that children amongst the most vulnerable victims are being systematically targeted, including through their ongoing transfer and deportation, which amount to crimes against humanity and war crimes. We call for an immediate, safe, and unconditional return of forcibly detained or transferred Ukrainian children. Furthermore, we remain profoundly concerned about the continued torture and sexual violence inflicted on the Ukrainian population. This is unacceptable. Mr. Vice President, Liechtenstein expresses its firm support for the Commission's efforts to contribute to accountability for these violations. We support ongoing efforts by the International Criminal Court and the mechanism set up by the Council of Europe. We stand with the Ukrainian people and reiterate our unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de la República de Moldova.
Mr. Vice President, we thank the Commission for the presentation. The presented report concludes that actions by the Russian authorities amount to crimes against humanity and war crimes, specifically targeting children through unlawful deportation and transfer from Ukraine. We condemn these illegal acts committed in accordance with an established state policy and focused on long-term placement of children in the Russian Federation. Our thoughts are with the affected families for whom these experiences have been highly traumatic. We call on immediate return of all illegally transferred children. The new evidence of sexual and gender-based violence with victims as young as 13 is truly appalling. The Commission further details the IHL violation regarding the illegal deportation of Ukrainians for prosecution in Russia and the unlawful imposition of Russian criminal legislation within occupied territories. It concludes that Russian authorities have systematically violated fair trial guarantees, refused to recognize the status of prisoners of war to combatants from Ukraine, and applied torture and ill treatment during investigations. These actions may amount to war crimes. These facts and assessments are reinforcing our call for accountability as an essential element of peace efforts. The Republic of Moldova will continue to stand with Ukraine while looking forward with hope to a just and lasting peace. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Montenegro.
President, we welcome the Commission's report and reaffirm our strong support for its work, which remains essential for documenting crimes committed in the context of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. First, the Commission documents the forcible transfer and unlawful deportation of Ukrainian children, one of the most disturbing features of this war. Investigations reveal illegal adoption, attempts to erase Ukrainian identity, and pursuit to pledge allegiance to Russia, along with military patriotic indoctrination. As reported, 80% of these children have not yet returned, leaving families in prolonged anguish. These acts, deportation, forcible transfer, and enforced disappearance, follow a pre-established state policy and may amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. Recovery must be child-centered, trauma-informed, and multidisciplinary. As a member of the International Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children, Montenegro is committed to securing the immediate, safe, and unconditional return and accountability for those responsible. Second, the Commission documents systematic violation of fair trial guarantees by Russian courts, including fabricating evidence and torture, constituting grave breaches of international humanitarian law and war crimes. Third, the report highlights sexual and gender-based violence, the deceptive recruitment of foreign nationals, and extreme violence within Russian armed forces. These findings underscore the urgent need for a victim-centered approach and comprehensive accountability. Montenegro remains committed to a just and lasting peace in Ukraine in line with the UN Charter and international law. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Rumanía.
Thank you, Vice President. Romania aligns with the statement delivered by the EU and thanks the Commission of Inquiry for its report and presentation. We have been witnessing the devastating consequences of Russia's unlawful war of aggression in Ukraine for more than 4 years now. It continues to inflict widespread suffering on the entire civilian population, with the most severe impact experienced by the most vulnerable, particularly children. It is estimated that approximately 7.5 million children have been directly affected by the war, including at least 20,000 who have been illegally deported to Russia. The Commission's findings offer significant insights into the deportation and transfer of Ukrainian children from occupied territories to Russia or areas under its control. Romania strongly condemns these actions, which the Commission has concluded amount to the crime against humanity of enforced disappearance and the war crime of delayed repatriation of children. We reiterate our full support for independent international investigations and all accountability mechanisms. Those responsible for violations of human rights law and international humanitarian law must be brought to justice, and no one should escape responsibility. Distinguished experts, your report also touches upon the recruitment and deployment of foreign fighters alongside Russian forces. Could you elaborate on the scale of this recruitment? I thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Grecia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Greece aligns itself with the EU statement and thanks the Commission of Inquiry for its report. The systematic drone and missile attacks against civilians carried out by the Russian Federation, together with the reported forced transfers and deportations aimed at displacing the Ukrainian people from their homes, further add to the blatant violations of international and humanitarian rights law that Russia is committing. We strongly condemn the targeting of civilians and express grave concern regarding the reported cases of torture, sexual and gender-based violence, along with the violence against humanitarian and medical personnel. We are particularly concerned about the findings of the report on deportation and forcible transfer of Ukrainian children, carried out pursuant to a pre-established state policy. Greece calls for an immediate stop to Russia's aggression and supports a prompt ceasefire in order to achieve a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in full conformity with international law and the UN Charter. We support Ukraine's sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity, and we stand in solidarity with its people. We call on Russia to comply with its obligations under international law and put an end to the hostilities. I thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación del Reino Unido.
We had hoped not to be making another statement about Russian atrocities in Ukraine, yet 4 years since this Commission was created, its work and conclusions are more important than ever. The new conclusions regarding the widespread and systematic deportation of Ukrainian children as a crime against humanity are shameful. This is a crime which demands the attention of the entire world, given the dangerous precedent that it sets. Ukrainian language and culture have been stripped out of schools in the temporarily occupied territories, replaced with so-called patriotic Russian curricula. Children are being recruited into Russian militarized youth movements and groomed to serve Russia's war machine. We are appalled by the Commission's finding of torture, coerced confessions and fabricated trials inflicted on Ukrainian civilians and prisoners of war, including unlawful deportations of civilians into Russia for trial. These practices show Russia systematically misusing legal processes to legitimise its aggression and conceal its crimes. The report also makes clear how foreign nationals from 17 countries have been tricked or coerced into fighting and, like Russian nationals in their armed forces, are subject to various forms of violent, cruel and inhuman treatment. How can the Council increase monitoring and protection for Ukrainians living in the temporarily occupied territories? Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Austria.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We are concerned about the situation of children deported and transferred from Ukraine, and we call on Russian authorities to facilitate a speedy return of these children. We also remain concerned about the condition of detention of civilians and prisoners of war, ranging from the deprivation of fundamental fair trial guarantees, and that Russia systematically used torture, including sexual violence, against certain categories of detainees. We condemn in the strongest possible terms Russia's unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine, Russia's unrelenting attacks with explosive weapons in populated areas have led to countless civilian deaths and injuries and seriously damaged critical infrastructure, including hospitals, schools and energy infrastructure, thereby putting the security and safety of nuclear power plants at tremendous risk. We call on Russia to stop these dangerous attacks immediately. We underline the importance of the continued independent and impartial reporting of the Commission and support all efforts to seek full accountability for these violations and crimes under international law. We therefore call on all members of the HRC to support the extension of the mandate of the Commission of Inquiry. Thank you, Mr. President.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Portugal.
Mr. Vice President, Portugal aligns with the EU statement and thanks the Commission of Inquiry for the presentation of its report. The Commission's findings are deeply alarming. Russian authorities have systematically deported and transferred thousands of Ukrainian children from occupied areas. Most have not yet returned, leaving families unaware of their whereabouts. These actions reflect a coordinated policy at the highest levels of the Russian Federation. In this context, we urge Russia to end the unlawful transfer of Ukrainian children, ensure their safe return and cease their indoctrination and militarization. We reaffirm our commitment to secure the return of every Ukrainian child. The report also highlights serious violations of fair trial guarantees, with evidence frequently obtained through torture or ill treatment, raising grave concerns about the independence and integrity of these judicial proceedings. We also call on Russia to comply with the Geneva Conventions regarding the treatment of Ukrainian prisoners of war and detained civilians. Portugal firmly supports the mandate of the Commission of Inquiry and reiterates our unwavering support of Ukraine's sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. Distinguished members of the Commission, in your view, what additional steps are needed to ensure a better articulation between the Commission's findings and other international accountability mechanisms addressing crimes committed in Ukraine? I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Georgia.
Vice President, we thank the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine for its latest report, which once again underscores the devastating impacts of the ongoing Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In this regard, Georgia reaffirms the significant role of the Commission in documenting a wide array of crimes and violations, many of which amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. Indiscriminate attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure, unlawful detention and kidnapping, torture, sexual and gender-based violence, as well as deportation and transfer of children have a severe and long-lasting consequences for affected populations, particularly for children who remain among the most vulnerable victims. We are deeply concerned of reports of these systematic abuses in the occupied territories and unequivocally condemn the immense human suffering and widespread destruction caused by Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. Finally, Georgia reaffirms its unwavering support for Ukraine, its sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders extending to its territorial waters. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Francia.
Merci, Monsieur le Vice-président. Mesdames et Messieurs les membres de la Commission d'enquête indépendante sur l'Ukraine, cette année marque le 4e anniversaire de l'agression de la Russie contre l'Ukraine qui a infligé des souffrances immenses au peuple ukrainien et porté atteinte aux principes fondamentaux du droit international. La France remercie la Commission d'enquête indépendante pour son travail remarquable. Dans des conditions particulièrement difficiles, elle documente avec rigueur les violations des droits de l'homme et du droit international humanitaire commises dans le contexte de l'agression russe en Ukraine et contribue de manière essentielle à l'établissement de la vérité. La lutte contre l'impunité des crimes commis dans ce contexte demeure une priorité absolue pour la France. Les crimes documentés ont atteint des niveaux sans précédent en 2025, l'année la plus meurtrière pour les civils ukrainiens depuis 2022. Cette réalité rappelle l'urgence de poursuivre les efforts visant à établir les faits identifier les responsables et rendre justice aux victimes. La déportation et le transfert forcé d'enfants ukrainiens que votre rapport met en évidence constituent des violations graves du droit international humanitaire. Nous continuerons à soutenir la Cour pénale internationale qui a émis des mandats d'arrêt pour ces faits. La France, membre de la coalition internationale pour le retour des enfants ukrainiens, réaffirme son engagement en faveur de la protection de ces enfants victimes de la guerre d'agression russe. Je vous remercie. Et une question pour les panélistes. Pourriez-vous préciser les modalités de mobilisation de soldats étrangers par l'armée russe comme chair à canon en Ukraine qui sont évoquées dans votre rapport?
Muchas gracias. Cedo la palabra a la distinguida representación de Polonia.
Mr. Vice President, members of the Commission, Poland aligned itself with the statement of the European Union. We thank the Commission for its comprehensive report and express our strong support for your work. 4 years after Russia launched its full-scale invasion, Ukraine continues to stand strong, refusing to give in to pressure. Those years have been filled with horrific war crimes and crimes against humanity, many of which you have detailed in your reports. The Russian military killed some 13,000 civilians, including almost 700 children. Names such as Bucha or Mariupol have become symbols of Russia's barbarity, a testament to a method of warfare that spares no civilians and respects no rules. Alarmingly, through the unlawful transfer of children, Russia is seeking to rob Ukraine of its most precious resource, the next generation. We reiterate our call on Russia to return the deported Ukrainian children so they can be reunited with their families and communities. Excellencies, our solidarity with the people of Ukraine is unwavering. Lasting peace will only be achieved through safeguarding justice and protection of human rights for all. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.